This new Steven Wilson album? It's not bad. This is the latest full-length LP from singer, multi-instrumentalist, producer, and songwriter Mr. Steven Wilson. Once the frontman of the famed progressive rock outfit Porcupine Tree, Wilson's rep in the prog space is pretty much untouchable at this point. So much so, his solo stuff often receives rave reviews from fans and critics alike. Though personally, I never really did care for records like The Raven, as well as Hand Cannot Erase, both of which I see as sort of modernized boilerplate prog tropes presented in such a toothless way. Sort of sounds like what you'd hear jamming on a Christian camp counselor's AirPods when they're really trying to convince you how into rock they are. That's in its best moments too. There's often an off-putting sterility to Steven's music that feels like something that would soundtrack, I guess, like a memory supplement commercial if it were trying to be edgy. Needless to say, I'm not really a fan of Wilson's work, but I do often check his new releases out of morbid curiosity, and that curiosity was piqued when I heard the first teaser to this new record, Personal Shopper. All the tight electronic beats on this one, along with the pretentious lyrics about consumerism. Would this thing be some kind of faux futuristic electronic rock opera? I don't know. I wanted to see how far the rabbit hole went down, so originally I was disappointed to hear when Wilson pushed the album back to 2021 on account of the pandemic. But now that it's finally out, despite expecting the worst, I actually found this record to be pretty tolerable and even enjoyable on some tracks. And I had that impression on first listen. But what's even more fitting and hilarious is not only do I kinda mess with this thing, but a lot of Steven's most hardcore fans seem to hate this record. I can hear you typing in the comments now, "Of course you would enjoy this! Of course this would be the album you'd like!" But really, I don't see why this record is so beyond admirability. Sure, there's still a stiffness to Wilson's singing and instrumental assembly here, but a lot of the mixes do punch a bit harder this time around, maybe because there are so many more dance beats. And honestly, Wilson's somewhat cold demeanor I think plays really well, intentionally or not, into this little dystopian concept he's got going on here. Now, I will say artistically, a lot of the ideas presented here are still sort of derivative, but at least Steven has switched who he's pulling from around quite a bit on this project, and I think he combines his influences in some unorthodox ways here and there as well. The track Self features tight, eerie, groovy, sequenced rock instrumentation topped with these sassy do-do-do-do group vocals, plus one of the most freakish guitar solos I think I've heard on any Steven Wilson track. You know, if you stripped the vocals out of this entirely and you told me this was meant to be the soundtrack to a forthcoming musical or theater piece from David Byrne that has some industrial vibes to it, I'd have to believe you. And again, Wilson's subdued lead vocals that are touched up to sound even more robotic add quite a bit to this track's themes of our increasingly digital and self-centered culture. Which, yeah, isn't a profound statement or anything, but at least it's focused and sounds decent. 12 Things I Forgot is easily the biggest ballad on the record. I like the glimmering acoustic rock instrumental on this one, the whimsical lead vocals, Steven really sounding like he's playing lead in some kind of theater production here. Plus, I also like the compelling lyrics about staying in touch with yourself as you age and times change. Steven portrays himself as not being as motivated or as ambitious as he used to be, feeling almost as if he doesn't know who he is anymore, or maybe coming to terms with himself becoming a different self. Sort of thought Eminent Sleaze was another highlight here. It's a very slow, tortured piece of bluesy rock music, a little psychedelic, a little proggy, slowly developing, part Floyd, but also part Talking Heads when those big bright group vocals come into play. Not crazy about it entirely, but I at least give Wilson props for trying to sell it on the vocal end. Between his croons and expressive yelps, he's really holding nothing back on this one. Man of the People most likely likely won't strike a lot of listeners as a highlight, as it is easily the most easygoing track in the project, but it's still a likable attempt at pulling together a semi-ambient pop ballad with a new age twist, as well as some Floydian flourishes of keys and guitar, almost like Steven trying to make his own take on some very late Floyd era stuff, but pushing it even further, trying to make it sound more futuristic. Then there's Personal Shopper, the track that I thought I was going to hate the entire album based on my first impressions of, but by the time it arrived in the track list, it actually wasn't that bad. The intro's very spacey and sequenced, topped with these falsetto vocals that feel like something that would kick off a Thom Yorke solo release. Then the singing, cycling synth bass and steady beats that follow afterwards feel almost like something that would land on Liar's Mess album. Believe it or not, the track also features these heavenly vocal harmonies and acoustic guitar breaks that could easily land on a Ghost record. And while the track's statements on consumerism are sort of like a duh moment, they're easily made up for by the fact that Elton John is on this song. He's featured in this lengthy, spacious spoken word passage where he's just listing off all of these consumer goods and stuff.
Toyota.
Wilson is really going in on this 10-minute fricking song. Again, a lot of the influences and ideas that he's embodying here are pretty clear and obvious, but he's bringing them together in a really odd way that I just never would have expected. There's also the Rockin' Follower, which features these Genesis-inspired vocal harmonies and piano passages. They're backed by, fueled by these driving drum beats and bass lines a la Queens of the Stone Age, maybe even LCD Sound System, which again is not only a crazy and creative crossover, but I love how this mix of sounds and vibes generates a song and an instrumental that sounds sort of aggressive, driving, but also refined and intricate, which I think also adds to the dynamics and themes of this record, in that you have this section, this piece of it that feels so bright and hopeful and, again, futuristic, forward-looking, while there's this underlying bit of grittiness and ugliness and, I guess, horror to all of it. The closing track feels almost like a very somber piano ballad that could have landed on Radiohead's A Moon-Shaped Pool, but it eventually progresses into this space where it's overtaken by some more ambient tones. It's very laid back and unsettling, but also, I guess, enveloping. Decent for what it is, really, and overall, yeah, I thought this album was not bad. You know, I think it's actually one of Steven Wilson's more enjoyable solo efforts. I mean, I'm not, like, in love with the record or anything, but it's certainly respectable. And for Wilson's fans, I guess I just don't really know what makes this record so off the mark. It's not as if the prog influences are totally gone. It's not like Steven's songwriting fundamentals have gone out the window here. Sure, some of the vocal performances and instrumental performances could be more exciting, and sometimes the lyrics are a bit too on the nose or not as profound as they seem to think they are, but that's kind of the case for almost every Steven Wilson record. Plus, I think his transition into trying to embody some other genres that are maybe more electronic, more pop-oriented, more danceable, stuff he doesn't usually toy with in a direct way, his move over to that was pretty smooth. So yeah, the Steven Wilson record, it's not bad.